a bookshop dedicated to Filipino Americans in search of their roots. Philippine Expressions Bookshop was established in 1984 to provide a home for Philippine writings in America, as well as books written by Filipino Americans. The bookshop promotes books written in English and other Philippine languages on all aspects of Philippine culture for all ages. Now on its 36th year in Los Angeles, the bookshop blazed the trail and opened new doors to make FilAm writers more visible in the mainstream literary scene. It is the first Filipino-American bookshop on American soil, and it was inspired by a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson: "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." It is located in the Downtown Arts District of San Pedro, California, where the bookshop hosts literary soirees such as publication and meet the author parties, book talks, lectures on Philippine culture by visiting Filipino scholars, and poetry readings throughout the year. These community outreach programs are offered free to the public. Every year during National Women's History Month in March, they sponsor a Pinay gathering to introduce and highlight the works of Pinay authors in the community. During the year, they also have specific programs to highlight National Poetry Month in April, Asian Pacific American Heritage Month in May, with focus on children, and Filipino American History Month in October. In the words of owner and trailblazer Linda Nietes Little, the bookshop is a marriage between culture and business. All around the bookshop and its affiliate, Pintados Art Gallery, Philippine cultural artifacts are displayed to familiarize Americans of Filipino ancestry with the culture of their ancestors. Yes, they sell culture. They also sell books. And now, welcome to the Book Talk series for 2021. Brought to you by Philippine Expressions Bookshop, co-presented by FilAm Arts. And now to open our programming, called The View from the Pew, A Catholic Priest Falls in Love by Dr. Alex A. Menez. Please welcome, founder of Philippine Expressions Bookshop, Linda Nietes Little.
Good evening, friends. Happy New Year to all of you. I would like to welcome you to the first in our series of book talks for 2021. This series is a continuation of what our bookshop has been presenting all these years, free to the public, and it is part of our community outreach program in order to create more exposure to authors of Philippine ancestry and to create more awareness for the Filipino presence in America. We welcome viewers of this program, our first event, and we hope that everyone will have an enjoyable evening. Tonight, we're delighted to have two distinguished members of the Filipino American community with us here. Welcome to this program, Dr. Alex A. Menez, and our other guest, Msgr. Loreto and Gonzales Jr. We are honored with your presence here tonight. Dr. Menez was a Catholic priest for 40 years and a Monsignor, a title that he never used. He was a well-loved and respected priest and very well known in the community. He has held key positions in the diocese. He fell in love with S.P. de Vega at the late age of 63. He asked for dispensation even if for reason of conscience they did not civilly get married, nor did they have a child, which are the usual reasons for dispensation. And dispensation was granted by Pope Benedict XVI. Today, he is a happily married man since 2011. Dr. Menez holds a doctorate degree in canon law from the University of Santo Tomas in Manila. He also took postgraduate courses in canon law at the Lateran College in Rome. He served as judge ponens of matrimonial annulment cases. And today, he's involved in a personal ministry and pro bono in assisting married priests who wants to apply for dispensation.
Thank you, Tita Linda, for that very lovely introduction. The honor is mine to be invited to this book, to this series of book talks by Filipino authors, FilAm authors, and I'm the author of this book, The View from the Pew. And I hope that some of you have already received your copies. And so thank you very much for this invitation, Manang Linda.
Thank you, Dr. Alex Menez. Let me introduce the other author present here tonight. Msgr. Loreto Gonzales is a retired priest of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. He was ordained in 1978. He served in different locations over LA, different positions, and at one time he was the director of the Filipino Pastoral Ministry. He holds a bachelor's degree in philosophy from St. Pius X Seminary in the Philippines, and he graduated from St. John's Seminary, School of Theology in Camarillo, California. Msgr. Gonzales will be in conversation with Dr. Menez as Dr. Menez unveils the many aspects of his past life as a priest and now as a married person. It will be quite a revelation and educational. It will dispel many of the preconceived notions that we laymen may have heard or believed in.
Yeah. Yes.
So
yes.
let us hear from both of them as they discuss the book, The View from the Pew.
Okay, you're in. I can see you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Mac.
Alex.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Dear good friend.
Yeah, very good.
You know, Mac, first of all, because before you go to your questions, I would like to tell you and the audience that, you know, for 10 years since I got married, I never had any opportunity to speak in public. As you know very well, that for many years as a priest, public speaking was our daily routine. But since I got married to the lovely lady SP de Vega, who is whose lovely face launched the thousand words in the book, I did not have any opportunity to speak. All I did during these 10 years is to learn how to listen. And so it's glad that the organizers of this talk have, oh, I see my good friend over there. Anyway, thank you very much, Mac, for accepting the honor to talk with me, to converse with me about my book. You know very well that you have read the book even before it was printed, and so you know it thoroughly from A to Z. And so let's imagine, I would like to imagine, Mac, that, let's set aside the titles, you as Monsignor, me as a doctor of canon law, but you have always called me Alex, I have always called you Mac. And so let's go on with this kind of very friendly relationship. And so, Mac, let's imagine that we are just in the rectory table talking nonsense, but of course with depth and with a topic that is relevant to the life of everybody. And so, my dear good friend, may you have the honor to ask me your questions.
I have the great honor to be speaking to someone who's a very dear friend of mine for a long, long time. We have been together for the sake of more information for our participants. We have known each other for a long, long time. I was 12 years old when I first met him, and we have been very good friends for a long time. And also with the book, I am very privileged to be part of it, giving input and some kind of advices. And I really feel so privileged to be part of this book, The View from the Pew. And so I like to just kind of preface my question first by saying that this is something that is not going to examine Alex or to dissect him. It is more like a couple of friends working collaboratively. We both love the church, and we both believe that the church, in spite of its imperfection, knowing that it had been instituted divinely, we also know that it's in the process of reforming herself, which means the word that we use is in Latin, ecclesia reformanda. That means that the church, led by the Holy Spirit, continues to renew itself, and all of us, church members and leaders, are part in the process of renewing. And so let that be a preface of our conversation. And secondly, the questions are easy, and I only have two. And
Mac, if I may interrupt, according to the Chinese, if a question cannot be answered, it's a bad question.
well,
So
we'll try to make it a good question. And I also like to ask our participants to write down your questions and send them to us online. And during this short conversation, you might be able to write those down, and we might be able to answer some of those questions. We'll try our best. But the question that I have for Alex is this, and I know it's a little bit difficult, but but it is a process. And so, Alex, in the process of your discernment, making a choice between two excellent sacraments, whether or not to stay in the priesthood or to get married. These two choices are excellent choices that it is very difficult to pick one over the other. But my question is, what was the clincher, the revealing element, the weight in the scale that tipped in favor of the sacrament of marriage, which you decided for, and you're on it at this time?
Mac, this is really a very good and existential question. In fact, I must confess that I cannot answer this question in 10 or 20 minutes because it took me 1 year during my discernment period to wrestle with the implication of this question. You know, when I decided that the love that I have for this particular lady, who, when I first met, as the book will describe, I met her in a very unusual place and in a very unusual time. But when I decided that, you know, I must pursue this path with her. So I went home to the Philippines. That time I was with you here in California. I went home to the Philippines, stayed in a very lovely place called Tagaytay. And there I prayed for 1 year. I wrestled with this question because it's not a very easy question to answer. It involves my life. It involves the life of another lovely person. It involves the life of my family. It involves the life of the majority of my friends, of my parishioners, and many others who look up to me for direction and guidance. You remember, Mac, that all my life I had been in the ministry of teaching. I was a professor in seminary. I was a seminary rector. And so, you know, I wrestled. What kind of example would I leave to the mentors or to the students that I have formed? In fact, one person told me that, you know, we are afraid that you're leaving the priesthood, which for us is a loss. And I'm very happy that they think of my leaving the priesthood as a loss, because otherwise, you know, they would not have cared if they did not love me or if they did not consider my services relevant to their salvation, because that is what we are called for, to lead people to God. Because we remember, of course, Mac, that we are in this world, not to be in this world, but really to be with God forever in heaven. And so this was a very difficult question to answer. In fact, one thing about the struggle I had is I was already comfortable in the ministry. I was a priest for 40 years, so why leave? You know, when nothing is broken, don't fix it. So why leave the priesthood when I already know the nook and cranny of the road? I know the comma and the period and the exclamation point and the question marks in this kind of life. So what's the point in living 40 years of experience to venture on the unknown? Of course, the future is unknown, but the person involved is known to me. Not in depth yet at that time, because it is marriage that brings two persons together to have an in-depth kind of relationship. The other question that I wrestled with was the fear of being judged unfaithful to God. You know, that's a very, very difficult question to answer. Is leaving the priesthood, do I displease God if I leave the priesthood? Another thing is the preconceived idea of the priesthood as a higher calling. You know, Mark, you know that very well. In our seminary, it has always been emphasized to us that there is no vocation greater than the priesthood. The priesthood stands in persona Christi Capitis. The priest stands in as Christ, the head of the church. But then, I will answer this question later. But for now, let me say that, that's a very difficult question to answer. Another question that really confronted me and which I found very existential and not an ordinary kind of question is, will I miss saying Mass? I've been saying Mass for 40 years and I loved it. The liturgy is something that is very dear to me and to the heart of many people. You know, to say to a small piece of bread and to be the instrument to turn it substantially into the body of Christ, what greater miracle is there than that? And I'm living that kind of ministry. So would I miss saying Mass? That's another question, Mac. And then one of the things that a friend told me, a fellow seminary formator told me, Alex, if you leave the priesthood, it will open a floodgate for many other priests to leave the priesthood. And for seminarians who look up to you, they may leave the seminary because they say, oh, if Father Alex left the ministry, what's the point for me to go on with the priesthood? There are many other questions, but I tell you, Mac, that there are so many questions that bothered me, and I tried to wrestle with this question for 1 year. And then finally I say, will I be happy in marriage? That's one of the fears that I have. But in the end, I must confess that there's been no regrets. I'm happy with the woman that I love and who loves me very dearly. I saw my niece, Manang Linda, we are being watched all over the world. I saw people checking in from the Philippines. I have my friends from Italy checking in. And my niece, my lovely niece, Michelle, he said, looking great, Tito. You look like one of the Beatles.
Yeah.
Really. So to go back to the main topic, I have so many friends who look up to me for direction and guidance, and what will happen to them? And so now I give you the opportunity to ask further the question, to pursue the question.
Thank you for the such a revealing and and really sublime responses. Going back to the difficulty and the hardship that you have to go through, making a choice between two good, great, excellent sacraments, sacrament of the priesthood and sacrament of marriage. I understand now, as you have explained to us, that there is so much grace as well in the sacrament of marriage, and you are happy where you're at now, and that's what it's all about. That is what we have mentioned most of the time, that the church sees to it that there is so much joy in each sacrament. For each sacrament is meant to give joy and grace to those who have been given and are partaking of the sacraments. My second question is easier, not harder. Since getting married, what have you learned that you did not learn when you were active in the priesthood? And those things that you learned, how are they going to inspire? How are you going to use them as an inspiration for priests who are still in active ministry, and also to the married people with whom you share the sacrament with?
Oh, Mac, thank you very much again for that question. And well, it's not really as easy as you think. But anyway, one thing I have learned about marriage is to listen. This is something that we were not trained to do in the seminary. We were trained to listen to the word of God. We were trained to listen to God, which is really very highly theological and very true. After all, we are only answerable to God. We do not answer to anyone else. And in fact, that was also one of the reasons why I was encouraged to proceed with my decision to leave the ministry. By the way, I always emphasize, you may have noticed, or the audience may have noticed, that I never say that I have left the priesthood, because I never did. I'm still a priest, because you will see in the book, you will read it in the book, that there is no dispensation for the sacrament of holy orders. I am a priest forever. The priesthood is like the baptismal character. Once you are baptized, you have received the indelible mark. And I'm speaking, Mark, not to you, because you know this very well, but for the sake of our audience, that once you are baptized, you will be recognized as a Christian in heaven. And me, when I go to heaven, I will be recognized as a priest. And, our married couples, friends, when you go to heaven, you will not be recognized as married, because the sacrament of matrimony finishes here on earth. There is no more matrimony in heaven. So tell your husband, let us better make use of our relationship here in this world, because in heaven we will not be anymore live as married couples. So enjoy your married life today. And by the way, every marital act is a sacred act. So to go back, I would like to emphasize, especially for the sake of our listeners, that marriage and the priesthood are not opposite realities. In fact, they are very much related. That's also in my book. The reason for celibacy is not because Christ was celibate. It's not because the church is afraid that if the priests are allowed to get married, the finances of the church, like in many Protestant ministries, the father becomes the pastor, and then when he dies, the pastorate passes on to the child. But in the church, it's not that way. But some priests say that, the reason for celibacy is because the church is afraid that the finances and the wealth of the church will go to the family of the priest. That's not the reason for celibacy. The reason for celibacy is not because what other reasons is there for celibacy? As a sacrifice, as a gift. There is no greater gift than love. And that is what you give to one another in marriage. So to go back, bring me back to the focus, Mark, please, because, I have the tendency to, as a professor, my students realize that they learn more from my parentheses. I give a lecture, then I make a parenthesis, and they learn a lot from the parentheses. So, but anyway, remember, Mark, when during our first night when we got married, you were there during the reception, and one of your priest friends called you and said, "Mac, let's call Alex and find out what he is doing at this time." It was 12 o'clock in the evening. That priest was a celibate priest. He doesn't know what a married couple does at 12 o'clock in the evening.
That's what we learned from you. We learned something from you. That's why we need to know about the details. So we will have the
Well,
experience.
yeah. Well, let's not go there. We are children are listening to this conversation. But anyway, what would I like to focus about what I learned Number one, really, what I learned about being married is to listen. You know, we priests were not trained to listen, except to listen to the word of God. But, you know, in marriage, I told you from the very beginning, for 10 years, I'd never had a public speaking role. I was listening to SP, and I have learned a lot. You know, one thing about marriage is I entered into the life of the lay people. I'm not familiar with their language. I'm not familiar with with the dynamics of their interaction. You know, we priests, we are cerebral. We are trained to think. We are trained to analyze, to dissect, to argue. But lay people, they are more on the emotion side. They are richer than us in terms of EQ, of emotional quotient. What is being emphasized in the seminary is our intelligence. If you do not know Latin when we were in high school, remember, you are out of the seminary. You don't have any vocation at all. We are trained to think. But in married life, you are trained to love. You are trained to listen. You are trained to sacrifice. When I was a priest, when I went to the rectory, I closed my door and the world closes. There's nothing inside the door inside my room that bothers me. But in marriage, it's a 24/7 relationship with the same person. And you pray together. You know, I have never prayed as much as I do now than even when I was a priest. Yes, when I was a priest, I said Mass. And that's why I told you from the very beginning, should I miss saying Mass when I get married? No, I do not miss saying Mass. What I miss actually really is hearing confession. But I do not miss saying Mass because I can receive Holy Communion. And what is more important is to receive Holy Communion than to be the main celebrant of the Mass. So anyway, we may have overshot. But finally, Mac, one last
Yes, we go to the finally there because we need to kind of ask the
yeah.
participants. I am reading some of the questions and some suggestions here. We should like to, as far as possible, like to address those that are coming up. So
Yeah, okay. But one more point, Monsieur Mac. You know, one of the things that I emphasize in my book is that there is a degree of shortcoming in seminary training. In fact, one of the things that bother the life of the church today is because we lack in the proper selection of candidates to the priesthood. And this is not my personal observation. This is the observation of Cardinal Robert Sarah. He said that the church is in crisis because there is, I quoted him here in my book. He said, at the root of this crisis is the deep flow in seminary formation. So I hope that we really are able to give good priests who give good homilies because our lay people hunger for the word of God. And our lay people listen to good homilies only because there's a lot of selections in the internet about good homilies.
great,
And so
thank you,
let's now
thank you
listen to the questions.
so very much. There is both a question and an observation from Aloy, your brother. Uh, can the
Yes,
view be
Aloy,
a
how are you?
reference? Can a view be a reference for better appreciation of being a lay and clergy, given the scope of its well-researched treatise? So, my my response to this is first of all, we like to focus in this book talk on the role of the laity, and especially the role of the women. And I would like to we spoke about this earlier today. I spoke with Alex that for the clergy, we kind of have a different forum for it. But from my point of view, this book focuses so much on the role of women in the church, and as
Yes.
well as the role of lay people, especially those who are married. I've read this book twice, and what really gives me a big impression of how good this book is on the chapter 3 about her story. And
Wow.
as a matter of fact, from the literary
SP would
point of
love to
view,
hear that.
that is the uh, most important part because of the book, because it really tells us about how important the sacrament of marriage is, how important the decision that Alex made to be able to marry SP. But I like to think of it more in terms of its context. It's not just one woman. It is not just one marriage. It is the whole church. And we look into the lay people as leaders in our church. And the lay people are equally important in the church as clergy. And the role of women is something that uh, we have to work on more and more in the future, in the present and future of our church, because we understand that the role of the women is very important. We talk about our mother, talk about our sister, talk about the women lay leaders in our parishes and in many different places. They are like our teachers. The church calls them mater and magistra. They are our mother and they are our teachers. They are our nurturers. So to me, her story is so important that we give credit to the role of women and give them more importance and more active roles in the church in the future.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Mark. My book, I have always thought that I would rather say I had my apprehension when I published the book that people may stop after reading the love stories. Some love stories are always interesting, and if it is the love story of a Catholic priest, it's even more intriguing. Really, love stories are phenomenal. Love stories attract readers. And in fact, the best seller of all times in the history of book publications, what is it? It's the Bible. And the Bible is nothing else but a love story. It is God revealing his love to humanity. So, love stories are always fascinating. But I was afraid that people may stop after reading the love stories. There are two stories, by the way, in the book, two love stories. Shir Mack has pointed out, there are a lot of things that our lay people will learn in the book. Number one, and I would emphasize this, that there is equality in dignity between the priests and the lay people. We lay people, and now I'm speaking as a lay person, we lay people, we have always been told that the clergy is superior to us. That is not true. That is not the doctrine of the church, because there is equality in dignity based on the sacrament of baptism. And as I have said in my book, if you are to ask the question, which is a better gift, to be called a child of God, which we receive in baptism, or to be called a minister of God's people, which is received in the sacrament of ordination? While there is parity, while there is equality in dignity between the priesthood and the baptized, it seems that to be a son and daughter of God is a superior calling than to be a servant of God's people. Don't you think so, Mark?
Okay, good, very good. That's a
And
great
that is what the lay people
response.
will learn
Yeah,
from this book.
and connected with the question is a question from Giselle, what does a Filipino priest bring to his work that is different from other ethnicities? Ano ba ang puso ng Pinoy? So maybe the two of us can make a comment of it, but
Yes, yes.
let, let's bring in a bit of information about Filipino priests here in the United States. I think that's one of uh, the the reference that Giselle wants to know, and also the priest elsewhere, and especially in the Philippines. For me personally, what the Filipino priests bring to the world, and especially here in the United States, is their in terms of their ethnicity. What they bring to their ministries, first, their value, their faith. Number one, their faith. Number two, their family. And number three, their dedication to their work. So, if you really kind of summarize, I would say what.
So I think we are running out of time now. So, and Mark, can you?
Yeah, right. I'd like to thank you for your sharing. Is so personal and so touching. So I'd like to call up Linda again and continue on with our book talk.
Thank you very much to both of you for a very interesting discussion. I really wish we have more time. It's a subject that everybody would like to listen to. Anyhow, we come to a second segment of our program. Monsignor Loreto and Gonzales has written 3 books, and tonight he will speak briefly about his 2 recent titles, Sacred Silence and Lorenzo, which is a 2-act play. Monsignor Mac holds a master's degree, among other degrees, in communications management from the University of Southern California. And his book Lorenzo was the author's thesis for his Master of Arts, Master's degree, Fine Arts in Creative Writing. Now, let's share what your thoughts are about the book, Monsignor.
Uh, I just want to kind of share with you briefly about the novella Sacred Silence, and it bears the theme that mercy and compassion liberates the church from the evils of clericalism. As we have mentioned in our conversation with Alex, the church continues to reform herself, and we are part of that renewal. And my goal in writing this book is primarily to share the story of a pastor in a fictitious way. Of course, this is a fiction. That this pastor was abruptly removed from his parish by the bishop without due process. And even though promised to be reinstated, the bishop did not keep his promise. And so this pastor was an outcast. But yet, he tried his very best to live up to his call as a pastor. And so he turned to the teachings of Pope Francis about mercy and compassion. And in that process, he he himself was renewed, had been changed, been inspired, and even though he was still an outcast, he continued to be a lighthouse to the world, showing the people, especially the sick, the disadvantaged, those who are lost, and sharing with them the message that after all, in the world, in the church, if only we do the works of mercy and be compassionate, the world will be less cruel, and the church becomes real and a source of inspiration and joy to everyone. And so my second book is Lorenzo, and it is a play in two acts, and it bears the theme of courage, faith amidst persecution, and the storyline is very simple. We already know about it. It is about the last year of the life of Lorenzo Ruiz de Manila. He gave his life in martyrdom in the 17th century Japan. And so from the Sacred Silence book, we are able to learn that clericalism in the church must be avoided in order for the church to be effective, being the witness of truth and compassion before the world. And the lesson we learn from Lorenzo is that married people have a special role in showing courage, steadfastness in their faith, and being able to become the models of our Catholic life. That's not only the clergy, but also the lay people. So these two books are in collaboration with the book of Alex. And as we have mentioned earlier, our work in a collaborative way, we're able to help move the church forward. And in spite of the many mistakes of the church or failures, because of our faith, we are still able to move forward, having been renewed ourselves and wanting to renew others as well. So that basically sums up what I needed to share with you, our participants. And let me call up Linda again to continue on and move on and towards the end of our book talk.
Okay. Okay, now that we have come to the end of our program, almost to the end, we have 10 minutes. I would like to thank Dr. Menez and Msgr Gonzales for their presence here tonight and for an enlightening evening. We really wish we have more time because there are a lot of questions that are left unanswered. But in saying goodbye, I would say thank you, and I hope there would be another occasion when we can do something like this on the same subject. Now, I'm happy to present our lovely producer of this program, Giselle Tongi of FilAm Arts. She has been a great mentor for us all. And thank you, Giselle. It was great working with you. I always also want to thank FilAm Arts for this collaborative work. And we look forward to more along this line in the future.
Thank you so much, Linda. I want to say thank you to both of our guests. And I also want to say to everybody that is watching right now that you have an opportunity to order these books. You can, if you order tonight, you have until 7 p.m. tomorrow on Tuesday, January 5th, to get a 10% discount and free shipping. And the books that we spoke about today will be autographed by our authors. Thank you to our authors for such a generous conversation to all of you. I found myself listening to your stories very interested, and I never knew that that was something that I would be interested in. So I want to say thank you so much. And Tita Linda, thank you for trusting me to continue this tradition of your book talks virtually. I know this is something new for you, but I'm so glad that people all over the world have had an opportunity to join this book talk with Monsignor Loreto Gonzales Jr. and of course Dr. Alex Menez. Maraming salamat on behalf of FilAm Arts. Thank you very much. Tita Linda?
Yes,
Thank you.
I, I also want to thank Film Arts again for this collaborative effort, and Giselle, of course, and a special thank you to Mia Reinaris, being my right-hand girl for this program. By the way, our next event will be on Monday, March 8th, to celebrate National Women's History Month. It will be at 6 o'clock. Repeat, 6 o'clock in the evening, Pacific Standard Time. We are going to present three Pinay authors who actually are blood sisters and all scholars. I'm not sure I would like to share their names right now. I just want to keep you in suspense. But watch for further announcement in our Facebook page. Once again, thank you for your presence and for your support. It means a lot to our Filipino American authors to have a supportive community and audience from the community. So continue with your support and we appreciate that. Paalam na, maraming salamat at mabuhay tayo lahat. Bye. Thank you.